Good evening and welcome to another edition of The Other Side. I'm your host, Bob Serba, along with my host, Paul Fournier, who just got back from vacation in Rhode Island. Tonight we have with us our guest, Stephen Comtois, who's running for state representative as a Republican candidate. Good evening, Stephen. How you doing?
Not bad yourself. Thank you for the invitation, gentlemen.
Thank you for coming.
Not a problem. We wanted to just give you a little background on Stephen, just so you know. He's the chairman of Brookfield's Board of Selectmen. He's the chairman of Brookfield's Republican Town Committee. He's a member of the National Federation of Independent Business Owners, small business owner since 1990, professionally licensed vocational educator, former chairman of Brookfield's School Committee, former secretary of Brookfield's Advisory Board, and a lifelong resident of Massachusetts. All right, Stephen, we've given the prep here. We'd like to have you talk about yourself, tell the voters a little bit about you, and why should we be considering voting for you should you get past the primary?
Oh, well, I have to get past the primary, and it's going to be a tough road. There's 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I personally feel that I am the best qualified. I would vote for myself. I'm not being narcissistic after reading that. We wear a lot of hats in life, and I'm proud to wear the hats that I wear, and the proudest is being a father, so I think that factors into that as well. I was born and raised in Charlton, so I've been in this area. I relocated to West Brookfield, lived there for 4 years. I've been in Brookfield since 2001. My accomplishments politically, I didn't get involved in politics till about, I want to say, 2004. I was on my way home from jury duty. Turned on talk radio, never listened to it before in my life, and Jay Severin, I don't know if anyone remembers him,
Sure.
talked me into running and doing something. And I got involved with the school committee. And once I saw what the state was doing, I needed to move on to the next level. And I ran 8 years ago, I don't know if anyone remembers that, against a very powerful Democrat who's running for Senate now, Ann Goby. So the 5th Worcester seat is vacant. I believe I am the best candidate, most experience through that list, not going into all that, for this job. And it's a job. I'm not running for the prestige, I'm running for the job, I'm running to be the best representative to this district. And I truly feel it's a Commonwealth issue. I think we represent the whole Commonwealth, let alone the district. Every vote that I take down at Beacon Hill is going to affect every single 351 cities and towns.
Given the fact that it's a Massachusetts town, primarily Democrat, how much impact do you think you could have if you get to that point where you're lucky enough to be able to represent the folks in this district?
That's one reason why I would ask you to vote for me. Being a Republican in the State House, you have the choice of committees, and that's where you're serving your constituents, is in a committee format. Through my life, education's just been a huge passion for myself. I want to be on the Education Committee. We see what's happening in Spencer. The foundation formula needs to be revamped. That brings more money back to the cities and towns, especially Spencer. The circuit breaker for special education needs to be redone. All these carrots that Beacon Hill dangles in front of us for regional transportation, things like that, they get funded close to full 100% during election time, and you see what happened there, but it's forgotten about on the off seasons. I'm going to be your advocate in Boston for education, let alone for everything else.
The one thing I think that I was on the school committee briefly, and the one thing that really ticked me off was the unfunded mandates, the special education mandates, the transportation mandates. The special education transportation alone is $1 million a year. And we're not given any money for that, and I never see anybody really making any noise about that, or about education for that matter. It's like it's paid lip service in this state. What would you try to do to try to move some of that forward and bring that to the forefront and say, okay, how do we start paying for some of this stuff?
There's no doubt in my mind that all 200 legislators down in Boston are advocates for education. If you look at the budgets in any city or town, the majority, if not over 50%, is education. Their constituents have to be screaming at them, knocking on their doors, calling them, writing the emails, texting, whatever they're going to do. But it's just lost in all the other, political mumbo jumbo, especially every 2 years when you have to go knock on doors and ask for people's votes again. Education, like I said, will be on the forefront, but what I would do differently is work those halls, knock on those doors within Beacon Hill, and do what I'm doing in Brookfield. Brookfield's a very liberal, for lack of a better word, town. I'm a Republican, I'm pretty conservative. I just won re-election for selectman back in May. I get things done, and it's done through teamwork, and that's how you have to do things. You just can't be an I, me. It's through people.
Let's stay on the education part of this for a little while. Where you were a former vocational educator. What's your feelings as far as MCAS, Park, too much testing, not enough testing?
It's a slippery slope. When I think of answering questions, I always look at both sides, the double-edged sword, devil's advocate kind of thing. Vocational education is tough. I've seen kids as seniors come into a classroom and cry because they can't pass the MCAS, which means they can't move on. But there are things within that system that can help. MCAS is a completely different animal than the Common Core. I don't agree with Common Core. I believe I agree with MCAS. You have Race to the Top, you have Park assessments, you just a lot of different criteria within that Common Core, which all comes with costs. It's money. And a lot of these cities and towns, and look at Spencer,
We are.
lack thereof.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're hurting. And the reason why I asked that is because the Park and the Common Core and MCAS, well, the MCAS in this state, but this is throughout the country, this Park assessment, the Common Core. And what seems to be involved with that is a lot of private businesses in some way, shape, and form making a dime off the.
Everybody does. People are making money on MCAS as well. Yeah.
Is it as much as, do you feel, is it as much as
I don't think there's
as
enough
Park
out there
or Common
yet.
Core?
I don't think there's enough out there yet. The beautiful thing, if Spencer, I don't know if has Spencer opt out of it.
Yes.
Okay.
The
Which is-
last-
Well, they decided to stay with MCAS, and
They're going to
Yeah,
stay with
they're
them.
gonna stay with them
You
next
can,
year.
if you're not a Race to the Top school, you can opt out of the Common Core. But one of the big issues with that is the testing. With the Common Core, the Park assessments, it's computerized. It's computer-based testing. You could opt out for paper testing and whatnot. A lot of different things, but nothing's done on Beacon Hill unless there's a special interest involved.
Well, and
that's a problem.
And that brings us, as far as the special interest thing is, obviously when you get into this, like you said, there's a lot of people that have their hand, a lot of companies or a lot of people that have their hands in the till.
And those are the lobbyists.
What's your feeling on lobbyists?
Knee-jerk reaction. You don't like them, but it's a job, and that's what they get paid to do. I think what you need to do as a voter is to look at that representative you're sending down to Boston and realize that they're strong enough to be able to say the word no. And I think that's how I deal with people. You got to be firm in your convictions.
Now you mentioned, the Circuit Breaker Fund, and the Chapter 70 is certainly a train wreck. I mean, there's nobody that can actually explain to you how do you come about this portion of money going to a town.
Yep.
Nobody can explain it.
Well, it's like 75% of 4 times the value. It's rocket
It's a
science.
ridiculous formula. It's an outdated
pre-calculus,
formula, and I remember when Mr. Alicia was state rep, and I had a question when I was on the school committee, and he says, "I wish I could explain it to you, but I don't have enough time." He said, "I'm not trying to get out of it."
Yep.
He said, he said it would take so long, and it's so convoluted. It's ridiculous. It's this archaic structure. It's like hieroglyphics. It's like, and I believe they deliberately do this so you don't know who's getting the money or why they're getting the money or who the money's going to. And I believe for a long time now that the state doesn't. I mean, the state pays lip service to education, but they truly don't. They're not truly invested in it when it comes right down to it. And that goes from the federal level too.
Well, it's sad because the men and women that are
Excuse me.
actually sitting in front of your children every single day are 100% dedicated to your children. Whatever you want to say about teachers' unions and longevity and things like that, these men and women care, and their hands are tied as well. And you talk to any of them, and they're going to tell you that. And it's not just at that level; it's all the way up to the administration. These bullying policies. It's all great. It's all good things. But it's that paperwork that's behind it. We were dealing with bullying. When we were kids, everybody was bullied. You're going to get bullied after school. It's tragic. It's
gonna happen.
unfortunate. But having to do the things that the state are making us do now are tying the hands of our administrators who are dealing with it.
Well, it's the policies. It's not just the policy. The policy itself is a great idea, but whatever happened to common sense?
A lot of legislation is based on great idea. I'll never argue that, but it's just misconstrued. It's that foundation formula definition all over again.
If you've seen the paperwork that has to be done, follow-up, and then follow-up to the follow-up, and follow-up to the follow-up to the follow-up. It's so redundant.
Vocational
It's
kids, you're
ridiculous.
supposed to follow them through a federal mandate after graduation for several years. It's sad. It's all money.
Now, how do you feel about funding for the towns? I know that's been a really, really big issue with every town. Every town
In
has
regards
the
to
same
local aid,
complaint.
or?
As far as
Oh,
local aid, as
100%.
far as
We could talk about that all day. I think we're forgotten after 495, to be completely honest with you. It's not just local aid, it's Chapter 90 money. You know, we just get a
Oh, absolutely.
just got a bill for 31 to redo that. That should have been done years ago.
Oh, there's no
Well, it's
doubt
like
about
pulling
it.
teeth,
Yeah.
and it's not from a lack of trying or a lack of the head of our highway department, Steve Tyler, Adam Gaudette. I mean, these guys are advocating for this. In fact, it's Adam who's brought in the funding for the CBGB
CDBG?
yeah CD.
Say-
I called it
There's-
CBGB the last week, and I got
so
another
many
big grief
acronyms,
for it.
yeah.
It was like, and he's started that, getting that ball rolling, and that's been huge for, as far as funding goes. But we're constantly dependent on grants rather than on the State House saying, and it's like you said, when it came to the big dig, we're going to be paying for that for years, and that was nothing but a money pit, and I understand that there's more powerful legislators up there that have had more time in, which I guess goes to the thing of the ideal for me would be term limits, but we know that's never going to happen.
See, I'm not, I know it's not a question, but I have to give my opinion. I believe every 2 years election day is term limits. It might be naive, but I really believe in that. If you work your butt off, if you show the
That's
other
a good
side,
point.
we do have term limits already. In regards to the Chapter 90 money, I can just say that, the team in Brookfield, these are all the experiences that I bring with me down to Beacon Hill. Because we have a great team in Brookfield. Our administrative assistant down at the Highway Barn, you want to talk about a grant writer that gets paid just for working an hourly wage? She brings more money into that town than anybody. We worked very hard to get I think it was like a $3.3 million bridge. If you've driven down 148 recently, that lost on the floor. I worked every single day, I want to say for about 3 months, to bring that back. Town of Brookfield's paying $20,000 for a $3.3 million bridge. I'm very proud of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're working on a dam project currently now that came with a grant that we applied for. Again, Cindy working diligently there with the Highway Department. We're doing a lot of good things in Brookfield, and I want to take that experience. And I think that's what this campaign is about, is experience. It's that leadership, it's that experience. And out of all 5 of the candidates, I believe I have the most. And this is a job interview. This is what I can do for this 5th Worcester District. And I believe I personally can do more than any other candidates.
What's the common theme? Because I know you've been out there knocking on doors. What's been the common theme among voters? What's the thing that seems to distress them the most? There's got to be 2 or 3 bullet points.
The biggest thing right now is immigration. And it's not just because of the whole border situation. It's just, we've been talking for years for tuitions to illegal immigrants, things like that. That's a big issue. The registry in my district, and I'm a little biased, I own a driving school. I own Greenlight Driving School right in the center. And that's another thing, is, I'm in all 11 of these towns. 5th Worcester District is 11 towns, all the way up from Hubbardston down to Brookfield, Spencer to Ware. That whole mass, I'm literally in this whole district every single day, either on the phone or physically in it, teaching kids how to drive. And we had this discussion. If you can teach a 16-year-old kid how to drive, you can deal with 199 other legislators.
You can go to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
But it's the registry is a huge issue, and we could literally talk for the whole hour about the registry of Massachusetts and what's going on. I see it every day. It's so mismanaged, and it's not just when you talk about Republicans in Massachusetts. This area is pretty conservative. It really is. Previous elections, our Republicans are winning. We really need to get Charlie Baker in there as well, because you can do a lot at a legislative level, but that executive branch is appointing these administrators to the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Rachel Caprellian was a Democrat representative that got handpicked to run the registry. She ran that place into the ground.
Look what she did with Southbridge. That was a train wreck when they had the whole problem with the registry, and they put hundreds of thousands of dollars into the registry at the Big Bunny Market. And then they turn around, and the way they did it, and with just a total lack of any class
Respect.
Basically.
I went
it was
to
an
that hearing in
absolute train
Southbridge.
wreck.
She was completely just condescending. It's sad. It really is.
Those public meetings were horrible.
They forget that they're servicing us. The registry is allocated $60 million in the budget. This is an organization that produces $600 million. And for them to say that they're in the red, it's a travesty. I don't agree with the melding of the Mass DOT into the registry. I think they should be their own separate entity. They're physically talking about moving the Southbridge Registry out completely. They broke ground. I think they're going to stop now in Springfield. They're building one in Springfield, and you have the option of Springfield or Worcester. They stopped Springfield. High drugs, high crime, shootings, stabbings. You want to go out and wait an hour in line outside the door in that environment? It's sad. It really is.
Train wreck.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Well, and then they started closing all this. Remember the satellite one that they had
Yep.
on James Street?
They had them everywhere. Greendale Mall.
Yeah, that's right. They started, and then they closed out. That was fantastic.
That was great. I went
You
to
know?
Southbridge recently, and I got to tell you, that's not someplace you want to be. Not the town, but just where it's at. It's in the old train depot, and it's like,
It's a
I
lot
haven't-
better than having to go to the Mass Pike.
Yeah, that's where it used to be, right?
yeah.
Well, they moved
Well-
it from Southbridge to the Mass Pike. They were administering road tests in Worcester for a while. Then they brought it over to Route 20. Then they moved the registry to La Rochelle Wide.
Back, I went there. I went to the Big Bunny one when I. That's how long ago that was.
Oh, that was a treat. I've been
But
to
it's for
Southbridge
people to
twice
say
now.
that it's not being used, that we don't need them. Go to the registry. The average wait time is an hour and a half to 2 hours. Road tests themselves, I'm on the phone every day. The wait time to get a road test is a 2-hour wait. You're literally on hold for 2 hours, and they'll only let you book 6 tests. When they don't have state police administering the tests anymore, they're civilians. They changed that about 5 to 7 years ago. When they started, there was almost 70 inspectors. Now they're down to 30. They're out 2 months for road tests, and this is a service industry. It's not just the registry. It trickles down to the driving schools, to the people that have to, use that facility. It's mismanagement, period. And it goes back to that administrative level with the governor and what we can do down in Boston to help them.
Well, look at DCF. I mean, there's another prime example of a mismanaged service. I mean, it's like that was an absolute
That was
tragedy.
somebody way over their head.
It took a second child dying for somebody to finally pay attention to that and say, I think we have an issue with this here. And that's,
And they still really wouldn't do anything about it.
no, they used to,
It was a forced hand. That was a forced.
It was a blame game. Nobody wanted to take
Right.
accountability.
Right.
Patrick didn't have a choice at the end. I mean, he had to pony up and say, "Look, I got to get rid of this woman. She's absolutely not getting a job done." But I mean, it's that kind of nepotism. I see it on the Massachusetts Turnpike. I see it in, like you're talking about with the registry. It's like anytime the Massachusetts Turnpike, crazy, that thing's been supposed to be paid for the last 10 years. It's like, and we're never going to see it in our
about
lifetime.
70% of it's going to employees.
Yeah.
Versus,
Well, they're putting the automated system. That's going in 2015. Is that what I heard? 2015 or 2016? They're supposedly putting that in, and that's going to cost like $100 million. So somebody's going to be making money on that.
I was just
It's
going to reference the what's in it for me mentality.
Well, that's. I mean, that's. I'm from
They're
New
all
York,
over the
and
place.
I've never seen a state like
they're
this.
all over the place in other states. You go down the Sun Belt in Florida, and it's just all it is a huge arch with a bunch of cameras, and they flash the pictures and they take it on the way by.
Well, that's how it is in Europe too. When I lived in Europe, it was the same way. They take a picture of the back of your head and your license plate. Within 48 hours, they'd mail it right to your house. It was like, oh, the back of my head looks pretty good. One of the you mentioned immigration, and I know I talked to Senator Brewer a number of times about that. The other thing is the healthcare situation, and I understand now it's more federal than it is state.
Well, tell that to the taxpayers that have to pay for the failed website. It was a Massachusetts taxpayer. Was it like $100 million? So it's all local.
And what kills me is I went in recently for surgery, and I signed up for the health care. Now, this was 7 weeks ago. I just got a letter in the mail the other day telling me I'm now on Mass Health until they can get this straightened out, and they've extended that till December 31st, 2014. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, that's good for me, but it's like, why can't you get this done? It's like, it's an absolute train wreck. It's like, no wonder Romney, tried to divest himself of it when he ran for president. It was like, he was part and parcel responsible for bringing
It was.
this thing in here.
They're all good ideas. Like, all legislation, great
Sure.
ideas. It's tough not to be cynical in Massachusetts, but you got to look at that silver lining. He was trying. The legislators were trying. But when it's broke, you just don't keep kicking the can down the hall. You got to do things. And when I ran 8 years ago, we talked about this. Those clinics that should have been popping up by now to save those ER times where you're waiting 2 hours to get your head stitched up. Those things should be implemented.
They got them in Rhode Island. I spend a lot of time down there, and there's a got to be 3 or 4 of them within an hour of us anyways. And it's just a drive-in clinic, and it's all that same kind of stuff,
Yep.
and away you go. Now, you know, Rhode Island's got its own problems. But
They got an unfunded pension.
they got a
It's
huge
unbelievable.
unfunded pension there. But, you know, I think there's a lot of things that just, and I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but they just seem to pile up one on top of the other.
And they
on
do,
top
but
of the other.
it's, you know, it's organization. I'm extremely organized. Time management, I'm huge. I own 2 businesses. I own a construction company. I own a driving school. You went down the list. I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I had a meeting today for a couple hours, talked about town politics, got things done. But there's still time to do things like this. And you know, you talk about legislation that flew through in less than a day for upskirt videoing. You know, why can't we deal with EBT cards? Well, why can't we deal with things on the local level, like, you know, 40B, you know, that the low income mandate of 10%. You know, these are the things I want to do. Why can't we talk about prevailing wage, where we're about to build a police station in Brookfield and we have to jump through hoops that cost us, you know, probably, you know, 10 to possibly 15% more than it really should in the real world.
It'd be more than that.
Yeah.
It's more than that. I mean, we both worked in the industry. Paul worked in the
Yeah,
industry
but,
for years.
but we're doing it in a way through management, and I have to take some credit for that because it's managed correctly. You try to save, you know, it's not a, you know, penny, what is it called, penny wise,
Penny wise and pound foolish.
We have educated people in Brookfield that are doing the good things. You know, take for example our fire roof. We had our fire chief come in wanting $30,000 allocated for a new roof. You know, I questioned it. It's like, I'm in this business. We can get it done cheaper. We can use Tantasco as a vocational program. And I got up there. It took us a couple weeks. You know, the kids and myself. We got up there. We did a $30,000 project for $7,000. That saved the town of Brookfield $23,000.
Chunk of change.
Part of the police station, we have an old salt shed that's been kicked around, not being torn down for 5 years. You know, we took that by the horns. The state doesn't allow you to pull a permit to demolish your own property, which you scratch your head. You look at your building inspector, and you know, what if I didn't have a construction supervisor's license? You know, we would have had to pay somebody to come in and pull a permit to tear down a shed that's on town property. So, you know, you go down, you fill out the form, takes you about 5 minutes, and you save the town money. Things like that, you know, we have to implement down this, and that's common sense, like you said. We have to implement that. A lot of smart people in Boston, but that's a problem. They want to prove it, they don't want to get things done, and they want to murk it up, muddy it up, and make them look like they're smart.
Well, it's like you said, everything seems to die, you know, after the 495 belt. It's like anything coming out towards western Massachusetts, if you live in the Berkshires, you might as well be living in lower Yugoslavia. It's like nobody even knows who you are.
Yeah.
And
Florida, Mass, what?
And I mean, that's why it's so important. It's like, you know, and we go through this every 2 years, we go through this with the reps, and it's like, you want somebody in there that's going to be swinging for the fences at least. I want to know that somebody at least is going to be standing there saying, look, I'm doing everything I can, and understandably, you know, as a freshman state rep, or even with 2 terms under your belt, you know, it's until you can start getting on these committees, and a lot of that's a popularity contest.
Well, that's the beauty, like I said, about being a Republican. There's just not a lot of Republicans there. You do have a lot of choice to choose a committee. And I'm going right after that education committee. Every single day I'm going to work tirelessly for this Commonwealth, let alone the 5th Worcester District. Because it affects all of us.
It's a mess.
Oh.
It's a mess. Not because I was on the school committee for a couple of years, and I'll never run again.
That's too bad.
Ever.
I should be laughing. If you don't laugh, you cry. That's
You
my
do it.
Ever.
You do it
I'll
once,
ne-
you
I'll
never
never
do it
again because it's, you know, everybody goes in there with the same type of attitude. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then you eventually find out how tied your hands are, and that you really can't do a lot of the things that you really wanted to do.
But that's anything in municipal government.
You know, it's very disheartening.
But that's where, when I got into the school committee level, I said, you know, what can I do to get the things done? And it's a state level. You got to get down there and you got to be that voice. You know, you found out pretty quickly, both of you as school committee members, you're responsible for 3 things. You know, policies, budget, and that superintendent piece.
That's it.
And, you know, I thank God every day, ever since I was privy to caring about education, we've had a great superintendent. You know, and our current superintendent, you know, holy crap, just unbelievable. Just every day she's out there working. How she does it, you know, 5 towns, she's there every day, from Wales up to Brookfield.
That's right. You guys, is that the Quabbin district? What district is it?
Tantasco Regional.
That's all. Yeah, that's
Union
right.
61.
Well, you guys had a good superintendent prior to that, too. I mean, you guys have always seemed to have consistency with leadership
And I
out
think
there.
they were both Spencer residents.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd laugh, but I'm afraid I'll start crying. It's the one thing I think that amazed us recently was the DOE came in and the DSAC team, that was an eye-opening experience. To be able to see these people up close and personal and realize that they just don't have a clue. I mean, they really don't. It's like, let's get up there and we'll talk about policy and we'll talk about what we think. And throughout all of this, we've been through 3 superintendents now, and I gotta say, there's not a whole lot you can do with a superintendent that you don't feel is working in the best interest of your district, and that ties your hands tremendously. Tremendously. There is no evaluation team. There's nobody within the DOE to talk to. There's nobody to file a complaint with. And that's probably the largest problem with I think with education right now is the lack that these superintendents have such a total lack of control. They do what they want to do, and as we both found out.
No, they don't have a total lack of
No,
control.
the school committee controls the superintendent. That's one of the duties of...
That's the theory.
Yeah.
That's the theory, and it's a great theory.
Yeah.
Don't get me
Well,
wrong.
I
think
worked
it's
the
a-
theory that when, I guess I misspoke because when I first came on, we did not have a good, in my eyes, did not have a good superintendent. And I think she was there for about a year. And then, we had 3 superintendents since, and they've just all been astounding. And I pray to God that this one stays until she retires.
That district has just always seemed to do well, for whatever reason. I think a lot of it has to do, and I just wrote about this on our site recently, that it's not just, we keep looking for that Messiah, we keep looking for that person to come in and save our district when we've got those pieces here already.
It's a team.
People need to
stand
stand
It's
up.
not just the superintendent, it's her, if it's like her right arm, her associate superintendent, Deb is unbelievable. She's great. It's just, you speak volumes of these people, and that's good. And even down to, Deb and Jody and all those people within the office, it's a great team.
And I think that's one of the things that we're lacking here is it's that, the fish head rots from the head down type of thing. And I don't think we have good leadership here. I really don't. We don't have any. Listen, we didn't expect the interim superintendent to come in here and pull a checkbook out of his pocket and write a check. But I did expect a little spirit and, hey, we're going to turn this around. And
Stability.
Anything, something.
Just stabilize the district in the meantime while you're here for the year or 18 months or 2 years or
Then
whatever.
the computer piece is just, it's outstanding. It's just a lot of money. But it's something that was on the radar. We knew it in Brookfield. Erin and her team, they actually got almost $1 million grant, and not just for the schools, but it reached out to the towns. I think we picked up around $65,000 just for the town hall. Just new server finished today. We're getting new computers into the town hall, and it's just based on that XP programming.
Well, and I think you touched on that briefly. And that's one of the things that was so aggravating to finally get on the school committee and look at these past budgets. Because listen, until you're in that position and you can get your hands on these budgets and you take a look at them and you see where things are cut, where your principals come in and ask for X, and then you see where it is on the budget and they get Y with no books. We got books that are 12 and 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You can't teach with that. How can you teach
Well,
with that?
that's that capital plan that the school committee is responsible for as well.
We never had one.
Yeah.
We never had one. That was sad. The first thing to get cut was supplies and technology all the time. Supplies and technology, which is in the opposite direction of really where we should have gone. I mean, we're operating at almost a $24 million budget for 2,000 kids, not even now.
And that's too bad, because there's no doubt in my mind, again, not just the school teachers, but anyone that's, especially you two and anyone that's there now on the school committee level, they're there to do good. I don't think they're there for their own egos. I think they want to make the town better, the district better. And it's just too bad that I'm assuming a lot of their hands are tied.
Unbelievable. As soon as I get on the committee, I made it a point, because I had never been on anything like that before.
It's an eye-opener, isn't it?
It is, but you know what I did?
Yeah, it is.
But you know what I
That's
did?
where I cut my teeth.
But you know what I did is I contacted the superintendent and the chairman of the committee, and I said, listen, I want to go visit every school. I gave a heads up to the principals. I said, I'd like to come in. It was like 4 or 5 consecutive Wednesdays, and I went in and I listened. I sat and listened. But when you sit and listen, and when you try to implement what they're telling you, it's like night and day.
Mm-hmm.
Night and day. And then you can't understand why we can't make things work with $24 million in this district. 24. What do you guys have for budget? Any idea?
Not on the town level. the whole budget for the town of Brookfield is almost $8 million, and about half of that's a school.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know. It was such an aggravating thing, and it was one of the longest 2 years of my life.
That's too bad.
It-
I absolutely enjoyed and loved the school committee. I was,
Really?
Yeah, loved it.
There's not an individual that's gotten off the school committee in the last 2 years that can tell you that they'd ever do it again.
I would do it tomorrow.
In fact, it's kind of like watching your parents have sex. It's just not something you ever want to see
I
again.
can't
It's like-
speak to that, so I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot
there's no
pole.
way I
Yeah.
would ever. I'd rather pull my teeth out with
Really?
pliers than be on a school. Oh, without a doubt.
I love the whole concept of education. I love sitting in a classroom, instilling knowledge, and that's the transfer, and you know that's what you can do on that local level. You know, school choice when I got, and that's a leadership. You know, we got a principal in there that turned things around as well. We started it before we hired her. I think North Brookfield made a huge bad choice, for lack of better words. That's in proper English, I'm sure. But she applied to be a superintendent up there. You know, North Brookfield lost a great superintendent in the one that they had. But our principal, she's doing a great job. We turned around, I think it was a six-figure red school choice account into a triple-figure black,
That's unbelievable.
just by implementing policies and improvements. And
That's nuts.
It's nice to know other districts can do it because so far we're at a quandary as to what to do. We really are. We're at an absolute stalemate, and it's.
And it's not always just money. It's
No,
that,
it's
the,
not.
It's the
It's-
leadership.
I mean, the union will tell you it's money because that's their job,
Yeah.
and I understand that. I get that. They're always advocating for their people, and they do a great
Justifiable,
job.
yeah.
There's no question. Do I agree with them? Absolutely not. But I understand that that's part and parcel of the job. But when you have a town that's just been beat up as much as this town with the school system. I mean, you talked about pumping money in for computers. We had a $600,000 fund that the CVTE committee had come up with. It was a group of businesses that came in, and they were bringing money in, and they were focusing on we want to reinvest into the
Technology.
infrastructure of the technology. And the superintendent at the time decided to put that into the general fund. Just put it into the general fund. Why? Because superintendents can do that. They can move pieces around, and people can tell you all day long, well, the school committee runs the superintendent. I beg to differ because I've seen 3 of them now do it and do it well and just totally thwart the process and just totally drop everything in its tracks. And that's something, in fact, what was the piece we talked about with Tantascwa? Tantascwa, we had some students going to school at Tantascwa. They had school choice at
yeah.
Tantascwa.
Yep,
And
there's-
we have to pay for their transportation because of a small item in there that was kind of a loophole, and they found it and exploited it. So now we're on the hook for their transportation. To me, that's the kind of thing that I'd be looking for a state rep to say, listen, we don't need, it's not the big nuts and bolts that's going on. It's the little things. It's paying attention to
Well, it
the
is.
small things that affect all of us.
Special education is huge. You know, for a state to mandate what we have to do with that piece, and if we can't offer it within that school system to, use an outsource, that's a lot of money. It
ton of money.
ripples cities and towns.
Huge.
And here's the other side of the coin, and we're running into this. We've been talking to a lot of people because we're going to do a show on this about kids with IEPs. And the kids with IEPs, and I understand because the school, and you just brought up a good point, the school says we can't really afford to send these kids there, so we're going to do everything we can to thwart that process. And a friend of mine had said to me recently, he says, look, I got the money to fight this, so I got a lawyer and I got an advocate. And he said, I said to the advocates, what do you, and you know who I'm talking about, and he said, what do you do? And he goes, you're basically screwed. Now, the schools pay close attention to that and realize if there's people that aren't in a situation that can do anything, that's what's going to happen. And these kids end up paying that ultimate price. And I think that's sad. And that's to me, that's probably the biggest tragedy going on in the schools more than anything else is these kids with IEPs are not getting what they're supposed to get.
I would agree. I had vocational education has a lot of IEPs, and your listeners understand what IEPs are, individual education plans. They're good, but I always look at what's going to happen to these kids once they get into that real world. They're not going to have those pieces. It's meant, and that's that good legislation to make you feel good. It's meant to help them learn while they're there, but are they going to retain that information? Are they going to be able to reproduce that back in the real world? Because you're not going to have that piece following you for the rest of your life. And you don't want it. You want to be on your own, stand on your own 2 feet. Can we do things better? Yeah. We need to ask those questions. And that's not being condescending or mean. It's questions that are helping individuals.
But how do these kids get to that point where they are prepared for life if they're not getting it in these years in school between, and that's what my point. And I understand a lot of this is really PC, and well, we need to provide for everybody, and we do. And I understand what a burden this is,
to an extent.
But let me tell you something. If my kid was in a situation that was either handicapped in some way or disabled in some way, and the schools weren't doing what they were supposed to do,
I
would move heaven and earth to get that done.
And you have to look at that piece. And Steve Brewer was a great advocate for that.
Yeah, Steve was big on that.
You want to be
humble.
You want to be humble. Talk to him about situations like special education and health care and things like that. Man's seen a lot.
Yeah, he has. I mean, he's always been a big advocate for that. I know that from experience, from dealing with him on a couple different issues.
But the question is, can we do it better?
Well, I think that's the biggest question that everybody has is, can we do it better? Everything is so convoluted and it goes back to having your hands tied in the paperwork type of stuff.
Yeah.
And well, you qualify for this, but you don't qualify for that.
Yep.
But if you do this, you can get that. But you don't do that.
You need to. I did a tour of a few superintendents on the foundation forum probably around 3 or 4 months ago. And that's where you need to have and I keep reckoning back to that education committee. You have to, it doesn't even have to be hearings per se. You as a representative can go out to these districts and have your own little hearings, within the communities and ask these people that are down in the trenches every day, how can we do it better? And you don't think they know? 100% they know.
So,
and then you go down and you implement that into legislation.
Let's say you do become elected. I know I think we could probably sit here the rest of the next 24 minutes. Let's say you end up becoming elected to as a state rep. What is your plan as far as meeting with these towns and the district itself and implementing some of the things that?
It's like I said, I've already done it as a candidate, let alone a paid legislator. I've sat in the rooms with people that have to push that paper across the desk and make things work, make that balanced budget. You have to implement that. And if you do it one-on-one, great. It's probably more effective and proficient doing it in a group setting. I'd love to have that. But if I have to go out to every one of them, I've already proved that I'm doing that now. I'm going to continue to do it. When I ran the first time, I was a little naive. I didn't understand. I didn't have the municipal level of selectmen and finance committee. Those are the people that are running our towns. As a selectman, we're doing a lot. We don't have a town administrator in the town of Brookfield. Some of the towns in this district don't have that. Right. We just have 3, basically volunteer selectmen that are running a $7-8 million budget, making everything work in town. State reps need to go to those meetings. Not to be mean or evil to Steve or Ann, but in the 4 years that I've been there, I haven't seen Steve or Ann come across my desk at all at a meeting. Asking what can I do for you. I understand they're there when they pick up the phone when we call them. But
absolutely,
I'm gonna be that legislator that comes to a Spencertown meeting. Goes up to a Hubbardston. I was up in Hubbardston a couple months ago, and unbeknownst to myself, their selectman, as a Democrat, is running for state rep, and I'd love to run against him. I hope he wins the primary. I hope I win the primary, because the first question that he asked me was, "When you caucus, are you going to caucus as a Tea Party member?" You just laugh.
Because that's important.
It is. It's derogatory. And my response is that there's no Tea Party to caucus with. I'm a proud Republican. I'm the chairman of my Republican town committee. I'm going to caucus with the Republicans. But even proven in my own town, I'm a representative. I represent the people. Now, I've been in business for over 20 years. I've hired a lot of people, especially with the town. The first question that people ask me when I come to the door is, "You a Republican or a Democrat?" I've never asked that of anybody. This is a job interview. Every door I go to, every event I'm at, every TV program or radio, I'm here for an interview. And that question's always there. Are you a Republican or Democrat? And that was his question. I want to know what you can do for me. And that's what I want to lay out. What can I do for the town of Spencer? What can I do for the 5th Worcester District? And his second question was, how are you going to bring more revenue back to the state, to the Commonwealth? And to me, that's just a tax question. How can we elevate that $36.5 billion budget more than it is now? How can we take in that much money and for the past, almost 8 years, cut local aid by 40%? How can we do those kinds of things? And that's the mentality of a candidate like that. I just don't see
How
that.
about we just stop the misallocation of funding? You know, that we start using the money in a smarter way, that we start looking for better ways to invest our money back into the Commonwealth.
100%.
You know, and not giving businesses, look at the businesses that have walked away from this town that have gotten huge tax incremental financing, you know, taxes in exchange for, you know, we're gonna move here. It's like, you know, in Worcester that's real popular. And I don't think that's working in Worcester either. Worcester's looking at some major issues coming up. It's, you know, the reason I was laughing before when you said you'd never seen Steve Aran, because we always see Steve Aran. Every April we see the annual wringing of the hands, I call it. And, you know, well, we just can't, there's no money. And, you know, and that's, I don't want to see you once a year and do that. And Senator Brewer's taken me to task on it a couple times when I used to write my blog, because that's what I used to call it. And I, you know, and I have a lot of respect for Senator Brewer.
Well, yeah, I have respect for Representative Goby as well. They,
Yeah,
they
I
work,
do
they
too.
work every state. They're a hard-working team, 100%. And anybody that's going to question that, they're wrong. But, you know, there's little things that you can do that I would do differently, and that's why I'm a different candidate.
It's having a presence. I can't.
Well, Steve and Ann have a huge
Oh,
presence.
I know. I will say,
they're
if you
everywhere.
you can't go to a function that they don't usually show up. I mean, I'll give them that.
And
but,
that's a representative,
and that's important. And
But I think it's also important to get to that municipal level and meet with those people.
That's the part that's aggravating is the lack of, like you said, municipal level
it's true.
and one-on-one conversations with the people that live in that town.
Do you know how much that would mean to have? And when Senator Brewer comes in or when Ann comes in, they always, you know, they talk to the constituents and, you know, they work the room. But it's one time a year, you know. And it's like you're saying, they show up if somebody shows up at a selectmen's meeting, I'm impressed because there's only 3 of us there. Then there's me and Al and Carl. We're all sitting down, and I'm literally we're there almost all the
Unfortunately, I
selectmen's
think
meetings.
I've hit 5 towns in the 11 now. It's hard to schedule.
Yeah.
You know, my 2 other opponents, they're a little bit more time friendly. One didn't run for re-election. I chose to run for re-election because I enjoy this. You know, the gentleman from Hubbardston, gentleman from Spencer, they probably didn't run for re-election because first they don't want to lose. You know, I won. It's a great feeling, obviously, to win, but they say time as well. I enjoy what I'm doing. I think I'm doing a great job, and I want to transfer that down to Boston.
How do you feel, and I know this was a big issue a couple of years ago, the funding issue. There's a couple different sites out there. There's followthemoney.org. There's a couple different sites. One of the candidates that ran a couple of years ago had gotten so much money from outside sources, and by outside sources, I mean sources outside of our district. How do you feel about that?
More power to them. If you're running a good campaign, all the money in the world's not going to buy you a race.
You really believe that?
I believe that. If you're knocking on those doors, if you're making those phone calls, going to those events, you know, unless you're giving them the money, which I think is illegal. But yeah, all politics is local. It's a popularity contest. I'm running for this job because I truly believe I'm the best candidate. I'm not running because, you know, a couple elected officials said you'd be good at it and you're my friend and I'll help you.
You're a Republican. You walk up to my door and I say, okay, Mr. Comtois, why should I vote for you? What would be your speech to me? What would be your line to me?
I'd ask
Sell
you
me.
what your concerns were in the Commonwealth, and I'd try to talk to those. My concerns are education. My concerns are that local aid. You know, I think it rings true to everybody. We can do better.
And you feel you're the guy for the job?
Oh, 100%. I wouldn't be sitting in this seat. I wouldn't be putting myself out. It's a very time-consuming task. I love every second of it. I'm not complaining. But it's very time-consuming. I believe in what I'm doing. I believe that I'm the best candidate. I believe I'm the best for the 5th Worcester District. I believe I'm the best for Spencer. And I'd like to prove that. I think I'm proving it down in Brookfield now for the past over 3 years.
Well, your track record certainly seems to speak to that.
Well, we try.
You know, you wouldn't be getting reelected if you weren't doing the job. Bottom line. And I like what you said about, you know, term limits, that, you know, every 2 years you have term limits. It's like, and that's a good way to look at it, because you know what, if you're not doing the job, they're going to bounce you.
And look at Alicia. You know, everybody thinks that D at the end of your name is, and I heard the analogy from a candidate that an incumbent is like a tick. Every 2 years they just burrow in deeper. But he was there. He burrowed in. He was part of the establishment, and Peter beat him.
Well, you know why Peter beat him, and you know, it's because he worked harder.
Peter worked
and
his
that was
absolute
the
butt off,
bottom
yeah.
line.
I-
And I hate to say that, but that was the bottom line. He went out there and he humped. He hit every single house he could possibly hit. In fact, I heard a story from somebody who was telling me he's in East Brookfield in the middle of nowhere, at some chicken ranch, and Peter comes rolling in. You know, that's and Geraldo. I know him personally, and I think he's a great guy.
Jerry's a great guy.
I had no problem when I ran in 2010. And I ran as an independent.
He
which
dropped
is,
the balls up for the registry.
Oh,
he did absolutely
big
nothing.
time. He did nothing, and I got to know him really well. And you know, I got to know all the candidates well. And he thought that this was going to be, I'm just going to walk right into this, and you can never ever assume that.
And he had the money.
He
And
did. He
that-
had the money. He had the backing. It was a classic political struggle, and it should have gone his way, and
just-
he got out hustled.
proves my point.
Bottom line.
Yep.
You know, and that is the bottom line. You know, if you want the job, you can get the job, but you got to go out there and you got to earn it. There's no question.
Peter's still a hustler too.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
Yep.
We have our personal issues, but I can't. I got to give him credit.
Everybody does. I
Yeah.
worked with two very liberal selectmen in town. We had our issues. We spoke of one of those issues prior, but we worked. We worked great together. We had our differences, but we got things done for the town of Brookfield.
Well, that's the way you would always hope that politics would be. That, you know, it's not everybody's coming in with the same ideas, and that's the whole idea. And
But that's
we've
the
talked about that.
beauty of it. The
Well,
yin,
that's
the
it.
yin and the yang.
You know,
those
you
two
have to
sides
have-
of the sword. Yeah.
Yeah, if everybody comes in with the same ideas, you're never going to move anything forward. And that's one thing. It's like, you know, I recently had a conversation with somebody that ran for a committee and didn't get it. And it's one of those things where I respected the fact that, you know, and I would have voted for him. And I didn't agree with a lot of his politics, but I would have voted for him in a heartbeat, because it was like, you know what, you bring a lot of good issues to the forefront. You talk about issues, and just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean there can't be a common ground there. And I thought this particular guy would have been a great candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you know, and you hope that other people look at it like that when they're voting, and it's not just looking at the D or the R at the end of their name.
You can't. You really can't. Unfortunately, too many people do.
Yeah, and that's the worst part about living in the state, because I can't stand it. I'm a Republican, but I would rather listen to somebody and hear what they have to say and look at their track record and vote that way. I can't stand this Republican
Yeah.
Democrat
Well, that's
thing.
what's good with town elections, because, you know, you don't have that at the end of your name. I was an independent up until I think 2006, and when I ran for state rep, I needed that little letter at the end of my
You
name
do.
to justify what I was about, and I'm conservative, and it was just a no-brainer to be a Republican.
Because when I did it in 2010, I had no backing. I was an independent. I've been an independent all my life, and I wasn't about to change, you know, to meet some need. But I came to find out during the course of that, and that was an eye-opening experience. Let me tell you, it was a good experience.
Yep.
Met a lot of great people, but if you're going to do that, you might as well be running for the Prouty Prom Queen, because you don't have a prayer.
But it's a popularity contest,
Oh, it
unfortunately.
is.
Yeah.
And it's not just a popularity contest, and it is to a large extent. Not to you know, diminish what you're saying, but it's also the party. You know, if you have good party backing, and I've seen this on a number of elections, because we watch politics pretty closely on a local and a state level, and to watch how some of this works and some of the money that floats around, it's a pretty amazing thing.
Yep.
And it is, and there's some well-heeled candidates out there. There's no
We
question.
yeah, all of our events have been free this year. The first time I ran, it was all, you know, for fundraising and whatnot. But we've done around 4 or 5 events, and they haven't cost people a dime. It's all come out of my pocket personally. Had some great times. East Brookfield, we did some candlepin bowling all night. Just had a fundraiser up in Hubbardston. We actually have a fundraiser. If anyone out there is into bikes, motorcycles, we're doing a bike run, charity run. That's going to be our first actual fundraiser, where half the proceeds come to us, half go to the winner of the bike run charity of their choice.
It's a good idea.
Where we're looking to, and we're going to cover the whole district, all 11 towns, start
Wow.
off in Spencer, up into Hubbardston, and finish up in North Brookfield. So anybody out there, the website StephenComeTour.com. We have it on our Facebook on the event page as well. It's $25 for the ride, $10 for a passenger or just a guest. We're going to finish up in North Brookfield, and we're going to do a pasta dinner after.
What's the date and time on that?
August 9th, it's going to, registration's at 10 a.m. We're going to kick off at 12, and then the pasta dinner's at 4. So if you guys know anyone that have bikes, or you guys have bikes,
I sold mine.
they rent them and friends have them. So. But we're trying to get that to be a really good turnout.
We're actually going to be here painting, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, that weekend.
We're trying to get a little enthusiasm back into the district, and the new principal called us from Prouty, and he wants to change the blue that's on there to Panther Orange, and we gathered up a bunch of volunteers. So we're going to be doing that the 8th and 9th. So don't make any plans.
Well, get it done on the 8th so you can come out for the ride on the 9th.
I might do that.
Well, free yourself up for around 4
think-
o'clock and come up to
I
North
think I might be
Brookfield.
sick on the 9th.
You ain't gonna be sick on the night. You're gonna be there with the rest of us. Who are you kidding? And that's you might want to. We're looking for volunteers for that for the 8th and for the 9th. If you're interested, you can contact Dave Bayshant at the high school, 508-885-8500. There you go. 8 a.m. Both days. We're going to try to get some stuff set up. We're going to have everything there ahead of time. We would definitely like some volunteers. We'd like to get a little community spirit and get people thinking about the schools even during the summertime. And I think this is Dave Bayshant's idea and Paul's idea. I was contacted as a contractor. David contacted me and I said, look, I can work up a price. And I got talking to Paul, and Paul said, why don't we just do a volunteer thing?
No
And
price.
I said, I'd be more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
It's like, we take a lot of shots at the school, so it's like I'd just soon not be making money on the school's dime. So, and Paul, it was Paul's idea, and Dave came up and Dave said, look, I think that's great. So we got Sherwin-Williams to kick in. They're going to cut the price down to 50% for the paint, and this all the sundry items, brushes, rollers, covers, all that stuff's going to be. They're going to supply that for free. So we're gonna do what we can to try to get.
But
some
I'll see what I
community
can do to
involvement.
be with you on the 9th.
There you go.
You're definitely dreaming.
I'll let you borrow my sprayer.
Kyle, how much time we got left? We got about 5 minutes left. Just real quick, the Firefighters Association is sponsoring a fundraiser. The Spencer Firefighters Association is sponsoring a fundraising program to raise money for supplies related to educating and benefiting the Spencer Firefighters Association, the Spencer Fire Department, and the Spencer area community, and to help to fund other community outreach programs. In the coming days, all homes in the area will receive a request for a mail-in contribution. The firefighters wish to thank everyone for their donation by giving a complimentary 8x10 color studio portrait to be taken by a professional studio at the fire station at 11 Main Street in Spencer on August 16th and 17th. The fundraising program is legitimate, and the Spencer Firefighters Association asks for your support. If you have any further questions about this fundraiser, please call Spencer Firefighter Association President and Firefighter Marianne McLaughlin at 508-885-3555 for further details. Again, these guys, our fire department is all volunteer, and these guys they're pretty top notch. I mean, they recently had their funding cut by $30,000. I mean, as you're aware, we've had some serious cuts, and now with this override for the schools, we're looking at possibly, if that doesn't fail, having further cuts. So I don't know how much more.
And it's
you could
not just this
possibly
year
cut.
for Spencer.
And we're not exclusive.
But Spencer alone, you 8 years ago threatening to close libraries because of budget cuts, and then the federal dollars that came with that and whatnot. It's sad. It really is. And we can do better. That's the bottom line.
I think that's what I enjoy hearing. We can do better. I enjoy hearing that.
It's kind of nice to think that we can. I mean, you try to do what you can do, and it's hard for some of these folks in this town. I mean, 25% of our population, we've talked about this at length, is seniors.
Mm-hmm. And
these folks are on fixed incomes, and it's like, it doesn't sound like a lot of money when you're talking about in terms of an override. And I posted this on our site that, if the selectmen decide not to put this on the budget, they're going to put the school override's going to go on. But if they decide not to put the town services portion of it, as much as I'd like to see that go on and get passed, I can also understand the other side of the coin, because people are like, look, you can't just keep putting this back on the ballot and saying.
Well, that was discussed at the last meeting. They don't want to get beat up and keep presenting it. But if we've done it in Brookfield. If it didn't work, you listened to your constituents at that town meeting, or at the ballot box in this case, and you came back with a better plan. It works. They have a better plan.
The funny thing is, it's not funny, it's actually pretty sad, is that people didn't even realize that some of the things that our town administrator said was going to happen happened. We had people asking, well, how come we can't get into Luther Hill to go swimming?
Yeah.
How come we can't do this?
Why is it locked up? Yeah.
Well, weren't you paying attention? He told you that's what was going to happen.
And they rolled out the most comprehensive explanations, time and time. They had, I think, at least 5 public hearings, and they had each department head come in, Talk about what was going to be lost if you didn't do this. It was on TV. It was on YouTube. We talked about it on this show a number of times.
Apathy is at an all-time high.
It is.
The people that are watching, there's no doubt in my mind, you know that there's a primary on September 9th. I would like to think that I'm the best candidate for it. But you knock on these doors, it's like, well, there's an election? You know, I'm voting for Ann. Well, Ann's not running against her. I'm running for her seat.
It's amazing. Yeah. It really, and it's not a lack of knowledge, it's just a lack of just paying attention. And
at the same time, that double-edged sword, can you blame them? You know?
Nope.
No, because I think at some point,
ignorance is bliss.
well, it's not. It's that to a large extent, and it's also the fact that you also feel so. I mean, you see what's going on with the federal government. You see what's going on with the state government. You know, you see what's going on with the Senate and the Congress, and you get to the point where you're like,
why?
If I care, is it going to make a difference? No, I'm better off just sticking my head in the sand.
I guarantee you, I'm not a guy that sticks. I roll up those sleeves. I jump head first. It's an educated jump. It's not just a random head first jump. I don't want to get paralyzed. But you know, I work every day, every single day for this district, and I'm confident of that. We can
it's a full time job, and it's going to be, you know, it's.
But it's an enjoyable job. You have to want this job. You can't get pushed into it. You truly have to have that desire to get anything done. Because you get down there, you're just going to look around and say, I kick my heels up on the desk. I can't do anything. Whatever. I got 2 years. I'll ride it out. I'm not going there for that. You know, the day that I get elected in November, I'm down in Beacon Hill. I'm talking to these people. You know, I'm not going to go down in January and just get sworn in and be done. I'm working from day one.
Well, we got too many people that are doing that now, Stephen. So it's kind of nice to, you know, I'd like to think that the people are listening to what you had to say tonight, taking that into account. We're also going to try to have Jen Gosher and Donnie Berthuman, and we'd also like, I said, you really like to have a panel with the three of you in and do a town hall style, not debate, but town hall style exchange of ideas with the three of you. So any final thoughts? We got about 30 seconds.
No. First of all, your undertaking this is, I don't know if I could do it, you know. But I commend you on the way that you've approached it, your background, you know, how you want to try and be different and not just ride there. So, yeah, my utmost respect as far as that's concerned.
I appreciate it.
All right, folks, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back, and I believe in a couple weeks we'll put it out on Facebook when we have our next schedule. Thank you to Stephen Comtois for coming in tonight and sharing his experience and his views on politics, and we'll see you next time.
2 weeks.
Take care.